Okay, tonight, 1 Nephi chapter 19.
And it came to pass that the Lord commanded me, wherefore I did make plates of ore, that I might engraven upon them the record of my people. And upon the plates which I made, I did engraven the record of my father, and also our journeyings in the wilderness, and the prophecies of my father, and also many of mine own prophecies have I engraven upon them. And I knew not at the time when I made them that I should be commanded of the Lord to make these plates. Wherefore the record of my father, and the genealogy of his fathers, and the more part of all of our proceedings in the wilderness are engraven upon those plates of which I have spoken. Wherefore the things which transpired before I made these plates are of a truth more particularly made mention upon the first plates.
What Nephi is writing about, see, he's writing about him creating the plates that the book would be written on, because the plates were made out of ore, right? Which is at the end of the previous chapter, by the way. Remember, they had found ore when they came to the new land, and so they kind of all this nice minerals and everything that all this good material they could do stuff with. Right? So really, what happened was when they arrived in the promised land, he got the ore and made plates to start writing the book on. Okay, see, but before that, I mean, we're following the story, but he's not really writing it as he goes, right? They lived all that, and when they arrived at the promised land, now he says, oh, now we got material, now let me make some plates, and now let me write all the things that happened to us so far. Okay, so what he's writing here, he's writing about the creation of the material that he was going to use to write the book. So that's why it starts to get confusing. The record of Lehi is written on the large plates. Okay, so what you're reading about right now is Nephi creating the large plates to write the record of his father on it. And so that's what he's talking about here in verse 1, right? I made plates and I wrote the record of my father. Now, here comes the little twist. The words that you're reading right now, what plates were they written on? What did you say? The small plates. Okay, so what you're reading is this, but what it's writing about is the writing of this. Okay, so that's why it seems confusing, because not only is he writing about writing the book, he's not even writing about writing this book. He's writing about writing the other one. Okay, so if you follow that, all right, what you're reading is from the small plates, but now he's talking about writing on the large plates, which he started doing as soon as they arrived at the promised land. Now let's try and figure out verse 2. And I knew not at the time, which is the time they arrived at the promised land, when I made them, so the them now is which plates?
Large plates?
The large plates, okay, because now this is like 591 BC, all right? It says, at the time he made the large plates, so I knew not at the time that I made them, that I should be commanded of the Lord to make these plates. And so now which plates would they be? The small plates, because that's what he's actually, that's the part that we're reading now, okay? What's next? Wherefore the record of my father and the more part of our preceding the wills are engraven upon those places of which I have spoken, which is the large place, right? And wherefore the things which transpired before I made these plates, the small plates, are of a truth more particularly made mention upon the first plates, which are the large plates. All right. So there's 5 different mentions of plates there, and it goes back and forth.
And after I had made these plates by way of commandment, I, Nephi, received a commandment that the ministry and the prophecies, the more plain and precious parts of them, should be written upon these plates, and that the things which were written should be kept for the instruction of my people, who should possess the land, and also for other wise purposes, which purposes are known unto the Lord. Wherefore I, Nephi, did make a record upon the other plates, which gives an account, or which gives a greater account, of the wars and contentions and destructions of my people. And this have I done, and commanded my people what they should do after I was gone, and that these plates should be handed down from one generation to another, or from one prophet to another, until further commandments of the Lord.
Now if you look at verse 3, it says, after I made these plates by way of commandment. And now which plates are those? Small ones, okay, you got this going now, good. Okay, so after I made these plates by way of commandment, that I, Nephi, received the commandment, the ministry and prophecies, the more plain and precious parts of them should be written upon these plates. Okay, so that's kind of why I think that these are the smaller plates. It was almost, this is going to be the special stuff, right? The large plates are just more of a full history. So you can imagine that, they probably had every family member there, any kind of, wars and contentions and government things and whatever. It was a full, blown out record, whereas now the small plates are the more precious things, right? The things of more spiritual nature. So that's the way we had written it out eventually, or originally, remember. So large plates, we had history, kings, wars, contentions, right? Small plates, Nephi, ministry and stuff, okay? So things that could be used to teach the people. And as you read this, you can see that pretty much that's kind of what's here. It's a more abbreviated version of the story, but stuff that shows how God interacted with them. So you pick up things like an angel appearing to Laman and Lemuel. You pick up things like God answering the different prayers and the different miracles. You get things like Lehi's vision and the vision of Nephi, where he saw all the way down to the end of the world. So these are the things that you see on the small plate. At the end of verse 3, though, now it says, again, remember that it says, by way of commandment, the small plates were created. So Nephi was told by God to create these small plates, even though there would be some overlap, perhaps, in the information covered, in the time period covered. And now at the end of verse 3, it says, also for other wise purposes, which purposes are known unto the Lord. And now, so in other words, he's being created for some wise purpose, and he, in writing it, doesn't even know what that wise purpose is. But we know what it was, okay? When the book was being created, if you will, or interpreted, translated into English by Joseph Smith, remember the first 116 pages were translated, and then they were lost, right? But when Martin Harris took them to show his family, and they never came back. And God didn't allow them to go back to the beginning and start over, just to continue where you're up to. And basically where they were up to was the beginning of the small plates, right? So the first 116 pages were from the large plates, and that information was lost. But because the small plates were in place, the same time period could be covered in the Book of Mormon, even though the first 116 pages were not there, okay? Because otherwise we had a hole in the record. And in fact, if the small plates hadn't been there, then you'd be starting with Mosiah, right, in the Book of Mormon, because that's the first book that we have from the large plates, right? So you can see, I mean, and really what kind of sense would the book make then? You wouldn't know where the people came from, right? They would just suddenly be there, and you'd have, from Mosiah on. So by having the small plates, it covered that time period up to Mosiah. So that was the wise purpose, right? And now if you look at verse 4 talks about a little bit about more what the large plates would contain, which we've already said. Right, wars, contentions, destructions of my people, and so forth. So this will be passed on from generation to generation down through the ages, and in fact that's what they did. They passed it all the way down to the end of the Book of Mormon. They were using the large plates. Okay, the small plates, by the way, end at the end of the book of Omni.
And an account of my making these plates shall be given hereafter. And then, behold, I proceed according to that which I have spoken. And this I do, that the more sacred things may be kept for the knowledge of my people. Nevertheless, I do not write anything upon plates, save it be that I think it be sacred. And now if I do err, even did they err of old, not that I would excuse myself because of other men, but because of the weakness which is in me, according to the flesh I would excuse myself.
Okay, and so in 5 it says, an account of my making these plates shall be given hereafter. Now which plates are those? The small ones, right? So, whereas right here, in 591 BC, he's making the large plates. In 570 BC, he makes the small plates and starts writing that. So what you're reading was written in 570 BC, even though he's writing about 591 BC. Right? And in 2 Nephi chapter 5, verse 30, it records him making the small plates and starting to write this book. In 6, he's just kind of saying now, I'm doing my best to save the special stuff for this book. Right? Because it's the small plates, because God said, let it be something that's special, and for the people, something that can be taught to them. Now, why would he have to be careful about what he's writing on there, do you think? There's no reusing the plates, okay? Well, unless you engrave it, it's there. So therefore, he had to be prayerful and considering what needs to go on these plates. I'm doing my best to write what needs to be on these plates. But if I made some mistakes, I'm not perfect, and since lots of other people made mistakes also, I'm sure. So if you find any errors in there, well, excuse me, because I'm doing the best that I can to just be as accurate as possible.
For the things which some men esteem to be of great worth, both to the body and soul, others set it naught and trample under their feet. Yea, even the very God of Israel do men trample under their feet. I say trample under their feet, but I would speak in other words. They set him at naught, and hearken not to the voice of his counsels. And behold, he cometh, according to the words of the angel, in 600 years from the time my father left Jerusalem.
Now, in 7, it says, saying that he's talking about some things people hold of high value, and other people may think it of lesser value, right? And so he starts out by saying, for example, the God of Israel, some people walk all over him, right? But then now he kind of just changes the way he's phrasing that, because obviously nobody tramples on God, rather that people would, just not think highly of him, right? So they set him at naught and hearken not to the voice of his counsels. Now, as you see that there at the end of 7, it says, hearken not to the voice of his counsels. So in other words, if the Lord is telling us to do something, or telling somebody to do something, and they don't heed that, in essence, it's like they're trampling on God, because they just don't really hold him in the esteem they should at that point. Right, so that's kind of what he's trying to say here, is that if the Lord's going to say something, well, if you say you believe in God, you have faith, well, then you want to do what it is the Lord's telling you to do. Now, in verse 8, right, that says, now he cometh, and he would be who? Jesus, okay, all right? It says, he cometh, according to the words of the angel, 600 years from the time my father left Jerusalem. Right, now we kind of circle this verse when we go through and figure out timings in the Book of Mormon, because that's how we know where the book starts, was from that verse right there, right? Because otherwise, it's not like he's saying, okay, I'm Nephi and it's now 600 BC, right? And then it's now 590 BC, right? We just got to figure it out from the time frames that are hinted at in the book. And so if you take that, the 600 years from the time Lehi left Jerusalem was when Jesus would come. Therefore, the book starts at 600 BC, because that's where the book begins, is Lehi leaving Jerusalem.
And the world, because of their iniquity, shall judge him to be a thing of naught. Wherefore they scourge him, and he suffereth it. And they smite him, and he suffereth it. Yea, they spit upon him, and he suffereth it, because of his loving kindness and his long suffering towards the children of men. And the God of our fathers, who were led out of Egypt, out of bondage, and also were preserved in the wilderness by him, yea, the God of Abraham, and of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, yieldeth himself, according to the words of the angel, as a man into the hands of wicked men, to be lifted up according to the words of Zenoch, and to be crucified according to the words of Noom, and to be buried in a sepulchre according to the words of Zenos, which he spake concerning the 3 days of darkness, which should be a sign given of his death unto those who should inhabit the isles of the sea, more especially given unto those who are of the house of Israel.
In general, in 9 and 10, what's being described here? Just in general. Yeah, the things about Jesus, all right, especially about the end of his life in particular. Okay, that it says they would scourge him, they suffer, they smite him, they spit upon him, right, and yielded himself and lifted up on the cross to be crucified, buried in a sepulchre for 3 days. Right, these are all prophecies of what Jesus would be going through. Right, and again, remembering we're in 591 BC, so obviously it's prophecy, so it's for the future, not for the past. Right, now, you see all these names written in here, which you may or may not recognize, all right? Names like Zenoch and Noom and Zenos. Okay, these are prophets who had their own writing, right? That they wrote some number of, pages or book or whatever, or chapters with different prophecies, right? And so Nephi, in writing this, is picking out prophecies from these different men, Zenoch, Noom, and Zenos in this case, and quoting it here. Where did they get their writings from?
Did these come off the brass plates?
The brass plates.
Oh, the brass
Okay, the brass plates.
Okay.
All right, here they are right here, okay? 5 books of Moses, record of Jews, prophecies, and genealogy. And so prophecies contains, obviously, the prophecies of Zenoch, Noom, and Zenos, and many others, I would suspect. All right, in fact, others, like even some that we would have heard of, like Isaiah, or Jeremiah, all right, or maybe some others. So there was a handful of prophecies here, and these were included on the brass plates. And the brass plates came from where? From Laban, right? They were in the possession of Laban, and that's why they had to go back to get them, right? And actually, you start to see now why it was necessary for them to have those brass plates, because with a whole big adventure, you remember, to get them, and a lot of trouble to get them. And remember how we talked about they were 3 days out, and they had to go 3 days back, and 3 days again, right? So there was a whole big thing to get them, right? But without them, they would have no record of Christ, no prophecy of Christ, and so 600 years have got to pass yet till they get there. So there's going to be many generations, how would we teach people about Christ if we got rid of all this, right? If we had no Bible, Book of Mormon, right? How would we to now? I mean, maybe I could do it or you could do it because we remember, but then our children, their children, never would have even seen it. How could they possibly keep that going for 600 years? You couldn't, right? So it was impossible. These people could have held a faith in the Redeemer without the brass plates.
For thus spake the prophet, the Lord God surely shall visit all the house of Israel at that day, some with his voice, because of their righteousness unto their great joy and salvation, and others with the thunderings and the lightnings of his power, by tempest, by fire, and by smoke, and vapor of darkness, and by the opening of the earth, and by mountains which shall be carried up. And all these things must surely come, saith the prophet Zenos, and the rocks of the earth must rend, and because of the groanings of the earth, many of the kings of the isles of the sea shall be wrought upon by the Spirit of God to exclaim, the God of nature suffers.
So more prophecies being offered here of things that would happen even in different parts of the world when Christ would be crucified. Right? It says that God will visit all the house of Israel that day. Right? Some with his voice because of their righteousness, and others with other things because of their unrighteousness. Right? Now, where in particular do we know where some people got visited with thunderings, lightnings, tempest, fire, and so forth?
The Americas.
In the Americas, right? As you read in 3rd Nephi, the record of what happened at the time of Christ's crucifixion, right? There was a lot of destruction, right? The mountains became valleys, valleys became mountains, and so forth. So there was a lot of destruction at that time, right? Because those people were not living righteously at that time, right? But it's apparently other parts of the house of Israel, they were doing better, so they just got a visit by the Lord. Okay, where the plan's proceeding, the plan of salvation is moving along, right? But in some cases, it wasn't such a nice visit, right? So it's saying that by doing this, that people were aware of the crucifixion, right? And even I think it says in 12, even the isles of the sea, right? Because as we said other times, I mean today we're so used to communication goes all over the world, and you can know stuff going on anywhere. Well, obviously then there was no way of somebody living in Dominica could know that Christ was crucified in Jerusalem, right? But yet there were 3 days of darkness or other types of signs to show that this had happened.
And as for those who are at Jerusalem, saith the prophet, they shall be scourged by all people, because they crucify the God of Israel, and turn their hearts aside, rejecting signs and wonders, and the power and glory of the God of Israel. And because they turn their hearts aside, saith the prophet, and have despised the Holy One of Israel, they shall wander in the flesh, and perish, and become a hiss and a byword, and be hated among all nations.
I always like that term, by the way, hiss and a byword. It just gives you, kind of an idea that, by the way, what group of people is this referring to in 13 or 14? Yeah, the Jews, right? Because they were kind of hit for crucifying Christ, right? And but I mean, really, it was all in the plan of salvation that Christ would be crucified. But yeah, a lot of people put that on the Jews. They crucified Christ, and so in a lot of ways they suffered after that. So of course right. I'm saying through history we know of many ways that they made to suffer, in World War II and so forth. So yeah, there's been many historical accounts of how they suffer, and so that's a lot of that is related really to this, that they were kind of blamed for crucifying Christ.
Nevertheless, when that day cometh, saith the prophet, that they no more turn aside their hearts against the Holy One of Israel, then will he remember the covenants which he made to their fathers. Yea, then will he remember the isles of the sea, yea, and all the people who are of the house of Israel will I gather in, saith the Lord, according to the words of the prophet Zenos, from the four quarters of the earth. Yea, and all the earth shall see the salvation of the Lord, saith the prophet. Every nation, kindred, tongue, and people shall be blessed.
Yeah, this is taking the next step now, all right, saying that, I guess they're going to crucify Christ, and this is what's going to happen, but the time will come that then they would look back to Christ, and that's actually still in our future, right? That really hasn't come about yet, right? It says that at that time, then he'll remember the covenants which were made to their father. Yeah, he made that promise to Abraham, right, from way back then, and so he's keeping that promise, and that will be kept even in the future, that his descendants would be blessed. That's why the house of Israel has always been the chosen people of God, right? But yet they didn't follow the path that was prescribed for them. But so they're suffering for that. But now part of our mission as a church is to help the house of Israel to make their way back to where they should be.
And I, Nephi, have written these things unto my people, that perhaps I might persuade them that they would remember the Lord their Redeemer. Wherefore I speak unto all the house of Israel, if it so be that they should obtain these things. For behold, I have workings in the Spirit, which doth weary me, even that all my joints are weak, for those who are at Jerusalem. For had not the Lord been merciful to show unto me concerning them, even as he had prophets of old, I should have perished also.
1819 is basically the audience for the writing, right? So, we're writing this, first of all, for my own people, because I want to persuade them who Jesus is. I want them to understand who the Lord is. And then beyond that, I'm hoping that it'll go out to all the house of Israel, right? Not just my people, but all the house of Israel, because they all need to know who Jesus is. They all need to know who the Redeemer is, because they've all moved away from believing in Christ, right? So this is for my people and beyond, right? And then as he's doing that, you just kind of think, it's almost a humbling thing to think that the Lord preserved me probably for this very purpose, to record this writing and help to persuade my people of who Jesus is, because I could have easily stayed at Jerusalem and been killing everybody else, right? You think about that, about the Lord removing their family from Jerusalem, and here the city was destroyed, and so he preserved them, and obviously for a purpose. As we've said many other times, if the Lord intervenes and moves in some miraculous way, there's some reason for it, right? It's just not just random. No, he liked Lehi and his family, so he figured he just randomly saved them, right? It was for a purpose. He saved them that they might bring all this about.
And he surely did show unto the prophets of old all things concerning them, and also he did show unto many concerning us. Wherefore it must needs be that we know concerning them, for they are written upon the plates of brass. Now it came to pass that I, Nephi, did teach my brethren these things, and it came to pass that I did read many things to them, which were engraven upon the plates of brass, that they might know concerning the doings of the Lord in other lands among people of old.
So he's making reference to the brass plates here, right? But again, it's interesting to see that he's saying, these prophets, they're writing stuff's going to happen in their future. So, probably some of the prophecies even apply to us. So those people back then knew about us, and we know about them, and we know about the things that are written on the brass plates, right? So it's kind of like we're sharing information back and forth between the people, because God is directing it that way. So he's saying that so he says he's teaching his people from the brass plates, probably reading to them these different writings of Nun and Zenos and Zenoch and all those other ones, so they're getting a nice lesson on these different prophets.
And I did read many things unto them which were written in the book of Moses, but that I might more fully persuade them to believe in the Lord their Redeemer, I did read unto them that which was written by the prophet Isaiah. For I did liken all scriptures unto us, that it might be for our profit and learning. Wherefore I spake unto them, saying, Hear ye the words of the prophet, ye who are a remnant of the house of Israel, a branch who have been broken off. Hear ye the words of the prophet, which were written unto all the house of Israel, and liken them unto yourselves, that ye may have hope, as well as your brethren from whom ye have been broken off, for after this manner has the prophet written.
So, as he's looking at what's on the brass plates, right, he's saying, they spent some time reading from the book of Moses, which would be, the first 5 of the books of Moses, because those were on the brass plates. He says, but he kind of had a favorite one to read from. The book of Isaiah was the favorite, so he especially liked to read to them from the book of Isaiah and teach them that. And Isaiah is pretty much addressed to Israel, so therefore a lot of the prophecies involve Israel as well as Christ. So he's able to liken it to them, saying this is about us, right? I mean, maybe us in particular, but our descendants. So therefore we can learn from this because it's about us, it's about Israel. So he says we can liken these to ourselves.